Hello and welcome back to Refractions. I am Stephen Mallon, your host, and we are joined today for the last episode of the year, the gallery director from the MF Gallery, Meredith Fleischer. So, Meredith, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks. So, yeah, so if you can just start off actually by telling us what is your history with photography?
Well, it started at a pretty young age. I was really, let's see, about 6, but when I was gifted my first camera at about 13, I started documenting my life, my friends, school, carrying a little 35 millimeter Fuji point and shoot with me everywhere. And it went on to, high school, which is where I took my first photography class. And then went on to the Center for Creative Studies from high school, which is where I really kind of dove into photography and, um, for a 4-year degree, and actually graduated with honors in writing and creative writing from CCS. And then took a year off and did quite a bit of freelance photography for I'm in the Detroit metropolitan area, so I did some photojournalism for local papers, and then went on to Cranbrook Academy of Art where I got my master's degree. And then after Cranbrook, I took a little bit of time off and then moved to New York, which is where I really started to pursue my career, but wasn't really sure where it like how in the where in the photography industry I wanted to be. I was always really into fashion, but I didn't necessarily want to be a commercial fashion photographer. So pretty much like packed my bags and just had that dream of like being in New York in the fashion industry, and sort of figured it out as I went along, and worked a lot of odd retail jobs, mostly in the fashion industry, and started doing internships. One was at Men's Journal magazine, and then one was actually at a photo agency, which is where I first learned that photo agencies who represented photographers that even existed. Like, I didn't even know that that was a thing. And so that was a really exciting experience, because it was like a whole new world of like avenues of where you could be within the industry of photography and fashion. And it was exactly like the coming together of the two worlds, and how could I fit into that? And so, um, from the internships, I got my first job as an actual agent's assistant for a agent who represented very commercial photographers. But I learned so much in that position, because it was more of the business side of it and learning how agencies work. Um, she was an amazing woman. Her name is Randy Cole. She's still in business. I absolutely adored her. We still kind of keep in touch on LinkedIn, so it's always nice to see her name pop up. um, so she was spectacular. And then, um, but again, I was not in like a creative position. I wanted to be in a more creative position. And that led to another agency. After Randy, I went to another agency where I was the actual art director for, I don't, the title was art director, but I felt like it was more of like a curatorial job, because I was basically curating all the photographers' portfolios for the agents to pitch to editorial and advertising. And um, it was amazing. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't really shooting that much myself, but that was okay, because I still felt like I was being creative in the way that I was organizing the photographers' portfolios to present them, and for, like I said, either advertising or editorial. And what was really cool about that job was I very quickly got promoted to managing all of the creatives in the agency. So now I wasn't just curating all the photographers, but then I was doing the hair and makeup, prop and set, nail, manicurists, stylists. So I had the entire agency's roster under my belt. So
Wow.
both physical portfolios and online. It was very cool. I loved that job. It was like a dream come true. It truly was. Um and that's really where the whole like curating other artists' work became a passion. It was like a real, I really just loved it. I didn't know that that was something that I would ever really love. It wasn't something that I knew that anybody could do for a living. So the fact that I had this opportunity and I was just, I was like the first one at the office every morning, the last one to leave. I would come home at night and I would still be working on the website. My partner at the time would be like, "You're still working. What are you doing?" So it was definitely a dream come true. And I absolutely loved that job. It was like exactly where I wanted to be at the time. And and then I had like a kind of a personal thing go on in my life where I left the photography world for quite some time and really just didn't even know what I wanted to do anymore. I missed photography, but I was sort of just working odd jobs. And it wasn't really until the pandemic hit when I had kind of when I had all the time in the world, I had lost just a regular job that I had had, that I started the MF Gallery as just a blog. It was just, I had all this experience. I knew all these photographers. And I mean, I didn't know all of them personally, but I knew of them and had studied them and had worked with some of them and was kind of just like figuring it out as I went along. And the blog just kind of slowly turned into this actual online gallery and print shop, which is exactly where I want to be. And it's growing and it's a slow process, but I've always really wanted something of my own. With all of my fashion retail experience, I had had a small business of my own actually in grad school where I would reconstruct vintage t-shirts, and I had a whole bunch of retail stores all across the United States and even in London. And it was a really cool way to kind of incorporate fashion and photography and just being creative. And I love what I'm doing right now. I'm like kind of creating this small community of my own, it's really a cool thing that I'm doing and I love it. And it's how I really enjoy spending my time.
So you made the leap going from the agency, take a break due to circumstances, and then so you actually this is like your first like gallery job was as director.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I interned at a gallery, a local gallery here in Detroit. But I never had like actual gallery experience. I just
I don't know.
I created my own. I just decided to create my own.
Hey, but like you said, I mean, you're still, you're representing artists, you're curating, the portfolios. It's just that the market is different rather than going after
Yes.
editorial or advertising assignment. You're going after collectors, collections, and potentially, getting into other shows, right? I mean, it's in a weird way, I can see the transition, that it's not like you went from being a mechanic, you know.
Right, right, right,
There's probably
right,
some similarities to, photo to mechanics anyways, but
right,
nothing against mechanics. So I
right,
need
right,
them in my life. A couple of good friends are good mechanics, my neighbor.
right, right. We need them, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this was a huge career transition for me. I just took a leap of faith. I was like, I'm just going to do, like, what do I have to lose, And, so far it's been a phenomenal learning experience. There's been a lot of learning curves. It's very different curating portfolios to have in an online gallery, especially because I don't have a physical space for shows. But it was very different when the agents used to come to me and say, okay, I want you to put together a portfolio for we're going to pitch this photographer to the new spring product campaign, or, Vanity Fair spread, whatever it was. I mean, this was like high fashion, and it was like I just had an eye for it all, and I know I have a good eye. So now how do I put that to use in a different way, to get people to want to buy it? But to me, this is a little bit more about like community first, commerce second.
How so?
You know, as much as I, want this to be like obviously a successful, like a financially successful gallery, it's not all about the money. It's about how do I enjoy spending my time? And that's what's most valuable, is my time. And so when I'm looking for artists, it's about the work, it's about community, it's about what does their work represent? How does it make me feel as a person? What do I get out of it? Do I think somebody else, and it's hard because art in general is so subjective, so who knows what somebody would buy versus, especially with photography. Photography has always been kind of like the second, it's always kind of come in second to like every other artistic medium.
Yep.
And it's something that I've struggled with for now over 20 some years, is like, why does a painting get so much more recognition than a photograph? And I'm still trying to figure this out. It's an ongoing question. So
I, you know, I think painting is harder than photography. I think it's not that being a photographer is easy or making a good photograph is easier, but and maybe it's just because I'm such a horrible painter that I find photography easier. And maybe that's the stigmatism, that you've got this machine that is, and especially in today's world,
right,
has taken care of so many of the mechanics. Back in the, early days when people were, wet plate photographers, I don't think but even then there was still like they were fighting to get photography accepted as you know, as an art form, as a
right.
medium.
The
Uh,
respected medium, right.
yeah. And I mean, that was why, APAD was formed, is because the the dealers didn't feel that they were getting the respect that they wanted. They weren't getting invited, or at least not enough of them were getting invited into like the Armory show and, some of the art fairs. And that was why, from my understanding of their history, is that that's why they were formed. And yeah, I mean, as an online gallery, like people are buying the work based on how they look, on screen. Are you photographing the actual print sometimes? Like, how are you, I guess, taking advantage? Because you've got the web now, right? So you've got an international collector base in a
Right.
sense. And like, how has that been for you?
It's been a bit of a struggle. I mean, I don't have like all of the prints are made to order. So I don't have like a stock of prints. Sometimes before the photographer ships, I'll ask them to send me a picture, but it's harder to take a picture of a picture for you to really be able to see the beauty in it. I feel like you're almost better off with the image, not like the actual image, not necessarily an image of a print.
Hmm.
But I do sometimes show, like, if some, like when some of the photographers would send me prints just for me and my own personal collection, I will photograph them and then kind of use them in the stories or for leverage, for marketing purposes. But for the most part, I don't show the actual prints, which isn't to say that I wouldn't in the future. I'm very open to any suggestions, ideas, anything to help grow this platform and this community. It's almost like a little collective that I feel like I'm growing, of artists. So
How many people are you working with right now?
14, and then I'm launching a new collection in January, which I'm so excited about. So I try to do one a month, and then as you grow, you sometimes lose people along the way. So I don't necessarily have like a particular number of people that I'm after. It's all about the timing, it's all about the work, the content. But the goal usually is around one a month that I try to launch if I can, you know.
Nice. And what are you drawn to?
A lot of black and white. I tend to veer towards black and white. I do enjoy color quite a bit, but a mixture. I want like a very good mixture. I like a lot. My personal preference is a lot of 20th century. Um, the gallery mostly focuses on street photography, some documentary photography. I have a beautiful collection of celebrity portraits from the 1970s and 80s, and that same photographer also did a collection from Flipper's Roller Boogie Palace, which was a very cool venue in the late 1970s and early 80s in Hollywood, California, it's now, I think they're based in New York. I think it still exists, and I think they're in New York. Not entirely certain of that, so don't quote me on that. Um, and then the collection that I'll be launching in January is all punk rock. So it's all punk from the late 70s and 80s.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then part of what I look for in a lot of the street photography is dogs. I'm always on the lookout for dogs, and actually recently connected with all the photographers that I have prints of dogs so that we could I wanted to put together charitable donations to the ASPCA. So any print sales that sell from, it's actually on my website, it's called the Street Dogs Collection. So any prints that sell from the Street Dogs Collection are donated, 10% is donated to the ASPCA.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's about giving back. A lot of this is, it's not just so much about building the gallery for myself and for the artist, but it's also about giving back to charities. One of the things with the new punk rock collection that I'm excited about is we'll be donating 10% of the proceeds of that collection to Music Cares, which is
What?
artists. Music
Yeah, sorry,
Cares.
what's Music
Oh,
Cares?
yeah, it's musicians struggling with addiction. So they help get them help, the ones that want help. And I think that that's really important.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, it's a lot of it is just about giving back.
I I'm friends with another gallery director that's got a similar model, and they do like 3 or 4 art fairs a year, and um it's always partnered with a percentages getting donated to different charities, I think based on
I
either
love
the artist. It's great. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's fantastic. I think it really shows the character of the people involved too, that it's not everything is just about money. It's a and it and when money's involved, it's sharing the proceeds.
absolutely. I think that's great. Yeah, I try to donate, pieces to non-for-profits when they're doing auctions to fundraise for their programming. Because it just, it's something that I have to offer. Um,
Sure. That's wonderful.
yeah. So the gallery, so it's been Is it getting close to 5 years? You said it was in the pandemic. Was it right at the beginning or?
So the actual MF Gallery, which started as a blog, was started in 2020. It wasn't until 2020, like mid 2022, that I actually created the print shop. So I took a little like kind of pivot because I was like, the whole blog was basically just an Instagram blog. But now I'm starting to sell prints, but I have all these other photographers whose work I don't represent. And it was kind of like a awkward pivot because I didn't want to be promoting, all these other photographers whose work I don't own, or have copyright to, or permission to even to do anything with. So if you go deep down into my Instagram feed, there, I don't have any involvement with any of those photographers, but it's just free marketing. I don't do anything, there's nothing, I don't do anything with their work. So it was 2022 when I actually started the print shop. So we're going on 3 years with the actual print shop.
And you had mentioned the fact that everything is printed on demand. Are you involved with the production or are the photographers taking care of that?
The majority of the photographers are responsible for their printing and shipping. I deal with the clients. I have one photographer that I took that on as my responsibility, the printing and the shipping. So I have a local printer here, and yeah, so
How is the market in Detroit?
um, it's slow in my opinion. I mean, I don't go out to a lot of gallery open, like I'm not heavily involved in the Detroit art scene, to be honest. Um, Even with all of my education here and all the time that I've spent here, it's not, I was much more involved in going out to art gallery when I lived in New York. It was a whole different ballgame. Um, so everything that I do is kind of like isolated. I'm kind of isolated in what I do outside of like my research and connecting with, like I said, the artists and clients are really just, it's slow. It's a slow process, but you know, every photographer who's been in this industry for a long time, I'm talking like 30 to 40 years, who I've communicated with, I mean, they've all said to me, you know, are like, do you make a living doing this? And I'm like, well, I have multiple part-time jobs. And they're like, don't quit your other jobs. Like people who've been doing this a long time, they understand the process and how slow it can be, and have all given me relatively similar advice, like don't quit your other jobs, until you really have, I mean, I would love to have like somebody to invest in me for more marketing, that type of thing, because everything that I'm doing is organic. And I'm very honest with all the photographers that I take on that this was a career pivot for me. This is me starting over. I had took my name off the internet for over a decade. And, I mean, this was like a huge step for me. And, I rely heavily on the photographers, on their network of people, so when I take on a new photographer, if they're not willing to I mean, I don't view myself as like I'm very different than most galleries with my own large network of people. I'm like a single person doing everything organically, and I rely on, I rely on building I rely on myself to rebuild my own network, but also having the photographers network as well. So if they just want to give somebody images to go sell and not participate in any of it, then it's really not a good fit. I try to explain that this is really more collaborative than like just representation of somebody selling their work or trying to sell their work.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Like how much of that responsibility lies on the gallery having the collector base to sell the work versus the artist bringing, you know, their collector base and their fans? Because I don't think it's realistic as a photographer to expect the curator, the gallerist, to be, taking care of 100% of the sales unless you're like so immensely, large that the moment that you say their name, if you say
Right,
Berdinsky, if you say Avedon, you immediately know what the
right,
work is. If you were
right,
if you were not operating at that place that just dropping their name understands what the work is, I think that there is a responsibility of the artist to be helping with marketing, with promotion, with bringing, sales to the front door. I think it's your job to close the sale,
right,
but I don't think it's the hundred, I don't think it's realistic
right,
for artists to say, here's my print. I don't want to have to be bothered, you
right,
know?
right. I agree. I mean, and now, I mean, like at the very beginning, there was like I've learned a lot in this process too, because like in the beginning it was like just reaching out to the artist via email and like we would just communicate via email. Now it's like I require a Zoom call. I want to have like a face-to-face conversation. I want to see your mannerisms. I want to see how serious you are. A lot of these photographers, they're not really not necessarily my photographers, just in general, are not really serious about selling their work. So if they're not serious about selling their work, chances are it's not going to sell.
Yeah.
I mean, unless I have like a particular client who's interested in that specific photographer's work. Um, and it's tough. Because there's a lot of work on my end. I don't ask for any money up front. It's all my time. And it's 100% commission based. So that's kind of how I set everything up. But hopefully, in time, because like I said, this whole gallery is me starting over. So takes time. It's not 3 years is nothing, I mean, it took me like over 10 years to get to where I was in my career in New York, so it's like this is like just the beginning, really. So it would be great to have this conversation again in 7 years.
Let's plan on it. Let's do
I'm
it.
down. Let's
On stage
let's
somewhere.
right.
10 years later, 7 years at the 10-year anniversary.
Right. So yeah, it's definitely there's been some challenges, I'm not gonna lie. But it's worth it to me because I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in continually, celebrating the art of photography. I like that, I have a really good variety of artists who are much older, so their work is older, from so I have 70, even the collection that I have Europe in the 60s. Like I love that collection. I think it's such a stunning collection by Michael Ansel. And but then I also have work of younger photographers. I mean, they're not necessarily younger, they're more my age, but they started photography much later in life. Um, for example, Sarah Simon, her work is phenomenal, but like she's only been shooting for a couple years. I mean, this is all new to her. And when I started really kind of watching her on Instagram, I was like, she's just like getting better and better and better. And eventually I finally reached out to her and I was like, do you have any interest in doing this? So her work is just phenomenal and she continually blows my mind as her work evolves. Um, and it's cool to see too with some of these photographers, their work evolve, over time. And it hasn't been that much time either. So again, we'll see what happens over the years.
What are some red flags that have popped up when like you've had the Zoom call or like the Instagram, the email exchange, and like, oh, I think this is actually not going to work out. Like, have they come up with like any crazy demands at the beginning, or like what is soured a couple of possibilities?
Um, you know, people, I mean, obviously I require contracts with all of my photographers. So if somebody doesn't want to sign a contract, they're out. Right? There's no negotiating that. People who don't want to sign I mean, the contracts are for a minimum of a year. And so, I've had people ask me for 6 months. I said, absolutely not. There's just, I mean, there's just, again, it's not enough time. And because I represent so many artists, I rotate all of you guys, so on like usually on a daily basis, when I post, it's like I feature one photographer. Some days I might feature five photographers. It depends on where I am. Yeah. And I try to give everybody, equal attention. Um, that's not always easy either, it's hard too, because I don't want like my Instagram grid to go from street photography to like Flipper's roller boogie. I need a little smoother transition, or more street scenes or dog scenes to more abstract architectural stuff. I have a lot of variations, but again, it's like I want the variations because you don't know not everybody likes everything. So, you have to have a good mix. But at the same token, it's like I don't want to go too far. I want to have a couple of different genres that I focus on and then maybe bring in maybe one or two here or there, to mix it up a little bit. But I try to really focus on street documentary. I have my celebrity portraits and Flipper's Roller Boogie, and then my music, which is what I'm really excited about.
Nice. Is there anything like how do you feel about artists and like their CV, and like are you looking like to see like where they've shown in the past? Like are you looking like if they're in a bunch of like open calls at like, you know, art centers or museums or pay to play, like is that a red flag? Does that bother you at all, or does it
So
not matter?
I don't even really I don't look at CVs. I don't look at resumes. I don't care. It has no relevance to me whatsoever. It's about the work.
Nice.
If I like the work and I think the work is strong, then that's what it's all about. It's all about the work. Obviously, it gets a little harder with some of the photographers who have very little experience because I it's harder for them to come up with a biography, because on my website I like to have an actual like photographer's page talking about them with a self-portrait. They're required to provide a self-portrait. It can be kind of ambiguous. You don't have to be able to kind of see their whole face. I get that. But the photographer's page is really important because it shows the photographer, their bio, the collection, and then there's a link to the shop page. So it kind of redirects you. But that's kind of how I want it set up, so that it's like an kind of an exhibition within that page of that photographer. So so there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of time involved in putting all that together. Um, Sometimes I wish some of my photographers valued my time a little bit, a little bit more. But we'll get there. So, but yeah, the open calls, the CVs, they don't really mean that much to me, to be honest.
It's good to hear. I'm curious. I was talking to my wife about this, about, if having a resume that shows that you've participated in a lot of these open calls at, at the art centers and some of the museums that, their fundraising is, through these, these annual group shows that they do. And um I think it is good at the beginning because I think that the line items on the resumes are necessary and also helpful because you start getting used to, um, dealing with delivering your work and
Yeah,
delivering what you said when and where.
right.
And it's like good practice,
Yeah,
you know, where, I've curated shows through, I've got a group that I work with in upstate New York and also out with ASMP and everything. And the level of expectation from the artists understanding, how they are going to be taken care of is so broad,
right.
from both sides of the insanity spectrum.
Right.
Just
Right.
um yeah, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. Don't want to bitch too much.
For me, it's about the clients. I want to make sure my clients are happy, So my expectations are is when I make a print sale and I, communicate with the artist that we've sold a print, I expect them to respond to me within like less than 24 hours. I need to know that they're paying attention because if they're not, it's not going to be a good situation, so I give them alternatives of how they want to communicate. Do you want to be on DM? Do you want to text? Do you want to email? What source of communication do you want, so that when I get a print sale that day, I'm going to message you so that you're aware and you can have it ready, so that when you're paid, that print is shipped immediately. Because I'm constantly communicating with the client. If they're going to spend anywhere from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000, especially, I want them to know that they're being taken care of. And that's a
Definitely.
lot of my retail experience because I've worked in a lot of retail. So that to me is important, especially as a buyer. As a buyer too, I mean, I collect um, I've been fortunate enough where I haven't really had to spend a lot of money on the art that I've purchased because I've worked with so many of these photographers that they've give them to me. But not necessarily my photographers. I'm talking about even the agencies that I used to work at. I mean, when the studio managers would ask me to clean out, so and whoever the photographer was, their archives. I mean, I would end up with like a massive stack of prints, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, just throw them away, recycle them." And I'm like, "What? No, 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 no." And I'm like, "Can I have them?" And they're like, "You can do whatever you want with them." I'm like, "Okay." So I would come home with like just stacks of prints. They're not signed. A lot of them are test prints, but still, I was
Yeah,
like, I want these.
it's the print.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, that's, so that was
So what do you collect?
mostly photography.
No, yeah, but
Oh,
what kind of photography are you
oh,
drawn to?
um, I mean, I have a lot of fashion. I don't know if you kind of can't see it, but that's actually a Pamela Hansen print on my back wall that I got at one of the agencies that I worked at, one of the ones they were going to throw away or whatever. But mostly street, the stuff that I sell, I mean, it's street, it's abstract. Most of what I have kind of hanging on my walls is fashion from what I've had previously had, from the agencies that I worked at. Some of it's my own work, to be honest, too. From back in the day when I spent a lot of time in the dark room when dark rooms were still really, a thing. I mean, that's how I learned photography, was in a dark room. So when everything went digital was when I sort of was like, everyone's a photographer now. I don't really want to be a part of this. But then years later, eventually I got a digital camera and I still shoot. So
That's good.
yeah.
So getting back to our meetup 7 years from now and the 10-year anniversary, um, what do you want? What are some goals you'd like to see happen for yourself? Like, do you want to get a brick and mortar space or like art fairs? Like, what would you like to see happen?
I think, well, first of all, I'm open to a lot. Like I said, I'm really open, but yes, I would like to have a physical space. but not necessarily like your typical type of gallery. So I don't want to give out too much information, but I got ideas going on in my head. Um, Probably in the meantime, pop-ups, if I could find like cool spaces to rent for like a day, like just a 1 day show where people could just buy whatever they see, available. Um, it would be hard because now my photographers are kind of all over the world. So they'd have to like ship me the prints, and then there's a lot of moving parts in all of it. So I'd have to really kind of be strategic about it. But I would like to start doing some stuff, some shows in person somewhere. I mean, that's kind of next on the list, is figuring out how to do some shows in person.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's the empty storefronts, right? There's, festival, there's curating possibly. Um, because there's a photo art center, right, in Detroit.
Photo art center.
Wasn't there a
I don't,
Detroit? I thought there was a collective that had a physical space. If you don't know it, maybe I'm making it up. Maybe it's
I don't know. I
okay.
mean, but just because I don't know doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like I said, I don't immerse myself in the photography community here. I mean, I try to connect with some more local photographers on Instagram, but um I want people from all over the world. This isn't like a just because I'm in Detroit, it's a Detroit thing, So even if I did a pop-up show, it might not even be here. Maybe I would do it in New York. I don't know, or somewhere, or LA. I really don't know. Um, I just feel like I have so much New York content, and so many of my photographers, and as of right now, the majority of my photographers are in New York. So it would probably be most beneficial to have it in New York because they could bring their people, again, with the connections of bringing their network of people,
Yeah.
to a show. So I think that would probably be ideal to start. But again, I'm open.
I feel like I was in a bookstore in Queens on a production a couple of weeks ago, and it was half cafe, half bookstore. And I just loved the hybrid aspect of it because you were able to go in there and like get a coffee, work for a little bit, but also, pick up a book and potentially leave with it. And
Right.
it was such a just like warm, welcoming space.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happening more and more. Like the Capital One branch at Union Square had um I think it was like Blue Bottle actually had like an espresso bar inside the branch for a little while.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like if you're a Capital One holder, the coffees were like $2 for,
Oh,
an
okay.
espresso. And I was just like, all right. So
The hybrid thing is cool. Like the idea of like having multiple businesses kind of in one, the concept is an interesting concept.
yeah.
You know, I mean, if there's someone out there who wanted to partner with me doing something like that, again, I would be totally open to a discussion.
Because I think it also, it takes some of the pressure off, if there's a way to make it like a multi-use space, it's a gallery, but if it's also, a real estate agent's office or an architect's office,
Right,
there's the possibility that there's clients coming in, but the work is up on the wall. So there's a space, for people to see it.
right,
Because it's tough, like you said. I mean, it's, paying rent and paying, the commercial rates on water and on the internet. Like everything just gets a lot more expensive when it's in that actual commercial venue. And,
right,
it's like a month can go by, 2 months can go by, and there's no sales, but those bills are not stopping.
right.
Um, I've had you know, multiple friends in galleries, you know, close after, you know, years of business just due to change in the economy or retiring. You know, they're done. They've been selling
Yeah.
work and they're but
I mean, I would even be opening to partnering with another gallery. Like it would think it would be a cool concept to work with a gallery that has a physical space. And then maybe like I would curate a show of my photographers, but in another gallery. So it could be like a collaboration between two galleries, one that's online, one that has a physical space, and we bring in a whole new network of artists. You know, there's just so many possibilities.
yeah.
Um, so we'll see.
Are you gonna
Every
come
day's
into
an adventure.
Are you gonna come to New York for APAD?
I don't know. I hope, I mean, I would love to. I've been trying to get back to New York for a while, so we'll see.
Good time to meet, you know, meet those people and possibly check out the spaces. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are your feelings on the whole? I mean, we talked a little bit about digital, and I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be. But how do you think the NFT market is dead? Is that anything you're participating
I don't
in?
really, I don't have any interest. I really don't. I mean, between film and digital, it's like that's enough for me. Like even AI, it's like I don't really even want to get involved with AI. I want, you know, because of the internet, it's like half the time you don't even know if what you're looking at is real anymore. You know, I want an authentic image, whether, you know, it can still be authentic and be digital. But once you get into AI, now you're in total, like in complete manipulation of something that's supposed to be captured in a moment. It's supposed to be real. You're supposed to be capturing something real, you know, even if it's altered through light or motion, I feel like that's okay. But once you get into like actually creating something that doesn't exist within an image, it's not really photography to me. It just sort of takes it away.
It's
So,
illustration at that point, you know.
right, right, right,
Yeah, it's this ongoing struggle and question, you know. It's like it is now, you know, a tool integrated into the Adobe cloud, right? Like AI, you know, the generative background removal, you know, it's like you can delete people and cables and trees out
right,
of your
right,
image, you know.
right,
So it's simplified retouching. Um, but like what is the point where, you know, when removing some of those elements is changing the content?
right.
And, you know, like does that need to be labeled and stamped, and does it devalue it? I mean, and it, you know, there's the whole in the gallery, you know, world, you know, it matters to me. Like either if you tell me that an image is a composite, you know, that's perfectly fine. But it's like, don't lie to me about it. You know,
Right,
don't tell me that this was a clean photograph when the reality is that you know, the location, the people weren't out there at the same moment.
right,
And
right.
just be honest about it.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It takes away from the whole the craft of photography for me. You know, I mean, it's really, you know, photography can be used in so many different ways. It can be used commercial, advertising, artistic, intuitive, creative. I mean, it's like can be therapy for people. You know, it's a tool, you know, just like any other medium, you know. Um, but I feel as though photography is a little bit more versatile. You know, you
Yeah.
can't create like a painting for an advertising I mean, you could create a painting for an advertising campaign, but will you be capturing whatever it is that you're selling through a painting? You know what I'm saying? Whereas through a photograph, you're literally photographing the product because everybody's trying to sell something, you know? So to me, it's 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 such a unique medium,
That's true.
you know? And it's an intuitive medium. And I'm one of those people that does not believe that, an expensive camera is what takes a good picture. It's all about the person behind it, Again, it depends on what you're doing, because you certainly need the tools, especially if you're shooting in a studio and you need the light. Are there are accessories that you need for those types of shoots. But because I don't deal with like that's not what I'm dealing with anymore, it's more candid. It's more about capturing a moment that will
Absolutely.
never be recreated, So yeah.
This has been great. We're almost out of time. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
Um, just stay tuned. I've got this great collection coming out in January, so I'm super excited about that. And I guess, that's it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this has been really great. Thank you for everything that you shared, and I look forward to our next conversation
Our
and
reunion in 7 years.
exactly. All right. Thank you everybody for listening, and I will see you in the new year. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye.